website and also on the site of the American Embassy. My first question goes to the American guest. I'm a little bit afraid to ask because in my notes I put down what's the current situation of the American educational system, and when I was Googling something about this topic, I found out that there's about 40 million inhabitants in contrast to 5 million of Slovakians, and there's about 100,000 schools in the American educational system. So to ask this question may sound a bit weird, but still I will ask this. Would you be able to say what are the main challenges of the primary and secondary schools in California under current circumstances?
Well, I would say that the main challenges have mostly to do with some old assumptions about what the purpose of education is. We're, like your society, we still have these legacy ideas about the number of facts and mathematical recipes that children have to learn before they leave their primary school. And these are not the things we should be measuring, right? We should be measuring how we build creative capacity in children, how engaged they are as learners, and whether they are building the foundations of lifelong learning. Are they on a path to being contributors to society, or are they on a more restricted path into being consumers? And I think that we see some of those same challenges at the schools and teachers that I've met here in Slovakia. Those same assumptions being held over from, certainly before the communists got here and before the Industrial Revolution in the United States. It has been 100 years now of false assumption about what the purpose of education is. And instead of worrying about creating an education that we can measure easily, we should think about creating an education that prepares children for the 21st century.
Vlastne tú istú otázku, ale nie o amerických, ale o slovenských.
Okay, I will ask this very same question to the Slovak guest. We have a representative of the State Institution of Budgetary Institution, Ministry of Education, and then from the school and NGOs. So what are the key challenges for the Slovak elementary and secondary education? Mr. Pavlov? This is a representative of the State Institution Methodological Center. I hope there will be an easier question later on. It's really complicated, the challenges we are facing, and I still keep on understanding it within the context whether we know whom we want to prepare for what kind of the world, because the turbulences we live in and definitely the upcoming generations will face will be gigantic, and I am quite modest in this perspective. We shouldn't have like big high expectations that we would need to give up with this illusion. In spite of that fact, I believe that the Slovak educational system needs a recap and needs a revision of where we are standing. We know that there was a national project, a vision for 15 years. There was a legislation we are not really happy about that has launched so-called, I underline, so-called reform of the educational system, and I believe it's time to stop and think about what we are doing. I don't know where, but definitely we need to seriously think about it. Thank you very much. Definitely, it's a fact that the Slovak educational system is in a deep crisis if it cannot define on the challenges of the current period of our society. We have many burnout teachers who have a feeling of complete distress or complete lack of enthusiasm, who have a feeling that they are not appreciated sufficiently. We have parents that do not have really meaningful requests towards the educational systems. Many yearn for their kids to get a good education, but they don't know what a good education is. And then what can happen is that a kid, who goes to a school like Gever has, then they are playing and they are learning to play. Then they go to a standard school and they get all fails. So they fail because they cannot cope with the stress. So even the society cannot generate the idea and the expectation what it actually wants from this educational system. And it's a very complicated time ahead of us. And we really need to tackle all those issues. So thank you very much for this. I will just keep on and follow on what the pre-speakers have said. There are so many wise people in Slovakia who all know that the educational system is not all that it should be. Many people keep on thinking what it is about, but still there are no specific moves made. The so-called reform is being debated that has started something, and I didn't understand this reform at all at the beginning, I need to say, and I just thought that this is just those piles of useless materials that are uploaded on internet or stuck in the drawers. Then when I got more courage, I started to fly when and this allowed me for a certain change. But this whole reform is understood wrongly. We should picture burnout teachers who have very low motivation, be it from financial side or from any other side, and all of a sudden somebody came with this magic word reform. And all of us, the only thing we were facing and we needed to do was to fill in endless number of forms, and it just started badly. Probably the bad thing was that we started with all the paperwork and only then we went to reality.
I have to confess that my first question about the challenges was maybe too universal, so I'd like to take a different viewpoint over this question. Two of you are still teachers and two of you are former teachers, but now they have more of a theoretical experience. So I'd like to ask you, imagine you have children in front of you in your schools, or imagine your own children. What do you think they should learn from the school? What is the preparation for life that the school should give to children, and what should be given to children by families? This is a question to all of you. Okay, last week I was present at A-levels exams. These are leaving exams from the high schools. So for 12 years I've been observing how students are changing in front of me during these exams, the final exams. And I can tell you honestly that year by year I'm more and more sad, because what I see in front of me is some sort of recession of the culture of enlightenment or education. The way they present their knowledge, the way they behave, could be presented by anyone at street. But when you are taking your final exams, you would expect some sort of culture in the way you present your knowledge. What I'm trying to say is that today we hear often about competence, and I'm not quite sure I understand what they mean. I think this is a model of some Euro officials more than anything else. It's a very formal model. But what I would like to see is the classical education in children, in pupils, in students. Of course, I'm for innovative approaches, but what I'm missing is the core of knowledge, which is transferable from one generation to another. And we ourselves doubt now what is the core of this knowledge, I guess.
I think what we look for when children graduate from high school at age 18, what we want to see is students who have a passion for something that carries them forward in life. You know, through their, the reason that they go to university should not be because it's just the next thing that we do in our culture, which is what we do in our culture, but because that's where they're choosing to go, right? Because that's where their hopes and dreams lie. I think, too, we want to see children or young adults who are inspired by the challenges and the changes that they want to see in their societies, right? We want these people to be participants, not just bystanders as government and bureaucracies keep going along doing whatever they're doing. They need to take part in it in order to make change. And we want them to bring that change with foresight and understanding of their culture, certainly in their legacy, but also with a look to the future to see which of those things are just there because that's how we've always done it, and which of those things are available to change. Every generation should be a little bit shocking to the previous generation. That's a necessity, and that's a positive thing. If their ideas are challenging to us, then we're a healthy society. If their ideas are just like our ideas, then we're a stagnant society. And there's a reason children's music, popular music, always sounds bad to the parents. And let's hope that continues, not just in music, but in every aspect of culture.
I believe for 100 years there has been a conflict in pedagogy about the meaning of learning and education. Some people claim the core is to gain knowledge, the reason is to gain knowledge, and some believe that students need to leave schools while knowing something. And then there are people who believe that students should go through exciting experience. They should be able to work in a team. They should be able to plan their work, to be organized. They should be able to communicate. And this is a conflict which has been present here for about 100 years. And today, thanks to technology, which becomes more and more a part of our everyday life, we talk more and more about the meaning of knowing historical facts, like, for instance, the War of Waterloo. And the conflict is whether we should know about the date of the War of Waterloo or whether we should know the historical context of this battle. So today we are looking for the answer to this contradiction between the context and between the historical data. Teachers used to look at their work as a work of a mediator of knowledge. And today many people believe we are past that, and what Gever is trying to do at his school is to me a compromise between these two concepts. Today we're not able to make the school teach something to someone, while also teaching children to seek their own ways. But in Slovakia we have more of a classical system. Okay, I will never be able to tell anything new because I'm the last one, I guess. Yes, I agree that looking for something, seeking something is probably the most important thing. And when we talk about students leaving the school, I believe they should have a set of facts that they should know, and they should also have a set of skills. And here, the society should formulate the requirements on schools. We have schools, we have buildings with some system working there, and very few of us open their windows and look outside the school. Now I'd like to promote my project. When I look into my class, what I like most is my student called Adam, and for many years he was looked at as an outsider, and only insiders know that he's very clever, that during mathematics he managed not to use any definition at all and use just his sense, just his common sense, and resolve the tasks that no one else was able to do. So what I like is the individuality in my students. I'm trying to look for these individualities, and I'm not trying to raise a herd of sheep. Yes, I'd like your interaction. It's good that I provoked Roman to interaction, and he left the public platform. I'd like to point out to the paradoxical situation. In Slovakia, I believe our system is very schizophrenic. We have educational standards. These are standards for the content, and then we have standards for performance. I don't think this is a system which would work in any other country, where you would have a content which is prescribed and you would also have a form prescribed. So the performance means the competence and skills, and our decision now that we should take is to rid teachers of the standard of content. Usually they have academic education, they're graduates, so I think that should be enough in order for us to put the confidence in teachers. Thank you. Even though we might not realize this, I have written some notes, and you have mentioned core of knowledge and transfer of some core of knowledge from one generation to another, even though we might not agree on what the core is. Some of you mentioned technologies which influence the innovation and the input in education. And what Gever mentioned was passion that should be present in students when they're leaving their schools. And you also mentioned that a person who is in the woods might not see the trees because of the whole wood. This is a sort of way of saying that those who are very much in the system might not be able to look from above. So You also mentioned some performance, which should be what we aim for, and maybe we should forget a little bit about the standards of contents. So how does it look in America, in the United States?
In the United States, you see the full spectrum from very rigorous traditional public education style like you might see here to, down at my end of the spectrum, a radical alternative approach trying to achieve different outcomes. And I think the reason I felt that it was time to try a radical alternative was because I was meeting children who could recite the facts that they were learning as long as it wasn't too long past the test they had taken. Children in this situation are learning how to cram facts into their head long enough to pass the test, but not in a durable manner that lasts them throughout their lives. And if we're going to teach them the facts, hoping that somehow they piece those little broken fragments together to complete a picture, those better be durable. You know, they're going to need some time to assemble that picture. And that's why we decided we would start with the picture and give them the facts that would anchor that picture in their minds. So let's teach concepts first and then teach facts. Let's create the context and fill in the detail. That's the approach that my school is taking, but I can't say that's true for every school in America. We have some schools that look like prisons. We have some teachers who are not excited to be teaching. Societies, if they just looked at the history that they're teaching, they would see that for every dollar they spend in education, they get $10 back. It takes 2 decades, but that's a simple investment model you can take with education. You know it's going to pay you back. So why don't we invest more in education? It might be the only proven way for societies to advance themselves. No quick fix is going to make that change.
Thank you very much. The space is always open for your questions, so anyone would like to ask anything, just feel free to do so. I'd like to continue or follow the US model. Gever mentioned a whole spectrum of different ways of teaching. So what is the situation like in Slovakia? What is the variety that we can see in Slovakia? And that brings about a question of to what extent it is possible to apply any alternative in Slovakia. From what I know is that my guests here today are trying to bring innovation into schools. Can you tell us how effective and successful these attempts of yours are in Slovakia? Well, the basis for any innovation to get through to schools is to have teachers who are courageous enough to do so. And if you have courageous teachers, then you have the first step. And then there is a question of to what extent it is possible to implement changes in schools. And here I need to say that the reform of education really created better conditions. There is quite a great freedom today to implement new methods. There is a set of knowledge, there is still a content that you need to teach your children, but the methods you use, the approach you use can be pretty much diverse. I know teachers who have been able to come about with very radical changes, especially in the primary school, because when you have low grades, you usually have one teacher who spends most of the day with children. So she usually, these are women, that they have quite a bit of opportunities. When children leave the primary school, all the radical changes need cooperation of more teachers, and that brings about the problem. Because if I'm a teacher of physics, for instance, and I want to come up with some changes, but in order to do that, I would need my chemistry teacher to cooperate or my biology colleague to cooperate. And if they are not willing to do so, then it's probably not viable or possible at all. I'd like to go back to alternatives. We have some Dalton schools in Slovakia and some other types of alternative schools. But what we're missing is the overall, the national courage to start differently. And there are not many teachers who are courageous enough to try some change. So we would really need this reform, which enables, in a way it exists now, it enables individual teachers to come up with some alternative approaches. And these teachers can take children for 2 lessons and they can start some projects. But it's not really viable, it's not complex enough to bring about some real change. Me, myself, I went for some courses, some training of some alternative teaching, and during these courses, when I thought that my children would be as bored as I was during the training, I thought this is not worth it. We tend to forget how we ourselves felt in the classes, and this was my incentive. This actually was my driving force to try out something new. I thought about myself sitting at the desk in the class.
We sort of keep on forgetting, or we are trying to be revengeful. So how about being innovative, trying to do something different? Can I start from the scratch in one school, or if I want to change a school from inside, what should I do? What could I do?
I had the privilege today to work with a group of 8 students in a small school in Zvolen. And I didn't speak their language, but I said as my purpose was to create a provocative experience that would leave them with a little bit of an understanding about a very complex topic. And the topic that I chose was aerodynamics. I sat down on the floor with these children. I had an apparatus called a vertical wind tunnel, which is a little household fan that blows air up a clear plastic tube. And the tube is about this big around. I spent just 30 minutes with the children on this topic, and I didn't know a single word of their language. And they taught me how to say lieto for flight. They taught me the proper use of various other words, which now escape me. But in the course of this intensely engaging, hands-on experience for these kids, they did learn basic aerodynamic principles of center of gravity, airflow air resistance and simple ideas about friction. I think it's safe to say that those children had never had so much fun in a classroom, that was a transformative experience for these young children. Later at lunch, the educators asked me, "Did you notice anything about these kids?" And I said, "No, they looked like, they seemed like very well-behaved children, and I really enjoyed working with them." The children even discovered a simple configuration of paper that I had never seen before. So this was, having done this experiment with hundreds of children, in this single half hour, one child had invented a way to fold paper I had never seen. They were like, "Really? Are you sure there wasn't anything different about these children?" And I said, "No, any one of those children could be at my school." Later, one of my guides told me that these were the special needs school children. These children were some of the worst behaved, most difficult to teach. And I could identify personality types that were identical to the best behaving, best contributing children at my school. Perhaps it will be a surprise to you when I tell you that they were all children from a Roma settlement as well. It was for me a unique opportunity to meet these children and get to know them in their own terms, to see them as people, not as victims, and to learn something from them as they learned something from me. And I was struck by just how quickly they were able to work with someone who didn't speak their language, who came from a completely different culture, and to make real discoveries.
Now I will be devil's advocate, and there is an idealistic American coming to a special school in Zvolen. And he's something new, he's exciting, that means they pay more attention to you, and that means you achieve much more. But how to proceed in an ordinary education? What a teacher who goes there on a daily basis and faces real challenges with their behavior. Should he do such experiments with those kids? Should be more involved in that every single class?
Well, with all absolute due respect, I think it's terrible that you might think that any education could be anything other than extraordinary. I can't help the fact that I come from a different world, but if teachers are passionate about teaching, if they're not choosing teaching as plan B for the career that they wanted to have, and if we paid them enough that was a viable career choice, I think you would have a population of engaged, excited teachers creating extraordinary learning experiences that were uniquely tailored to the individual narrative of every student. And that's the approach I take.
I can just confirm this. Those were very wise words. Yes, it's difficult to say something more about it, just something about this question about the alternative schools. I believe that the alternative schools have made a great job in Slovakia after the 90s. Waldorfs or Montessori school, they have enriched the educational environment immensely. That's the institutional base of the innovation or alternatives, but the debate rather is on the individual level, how the teacher copes with the innovation that's maybe the recipe, what could be done about it. When I heard the question now, a certain story of one teacher occurred to me. She was telling this story 2 years ago at one conference. She teaches at primary school in a big city, at this big blocks of flats, and he teaches one of the worst subjects, which is chemistry. Well, the teacher of chemistry in a big urban area is the least popular ever at that school. He has the least active approach of the students. The students are not enthusiastic and they are not involved. This teacher went through this education, and within this education she was requested, as the other participants, to do a project-based learning. And she said, well, I know these students of mine, they keep on complaining, and that's total nonsense. How on earth could I potentially make a project with those students of mine? Well, but she needed to do so, and she asked her students whether they were interested in doing a project. The first, and then it was a continuum of 8 months of surprises. First surprise was the student said, oh yes, because at the beginning she thought that nobody would be interested. Then she was surprised that they would like to play Seaside Miami, because there is so much chemistry in that. Of course, that's not chemistry that is normally instructed at the elementary school, but it's so much about chemistry. So she was totally surprised that the students were interested in project, that they had an idea, a specific idea about the topic, and then she was surprised that every single student started to work in the project, they liked it, and the upcoming 8 months she actually experienced the best time of her life. That's the way she was saying. She was like running on surprises. She was on this high of surprises. On one hand, she experienced all of this, and she was positively assessed, because when she wrote an article about that, she won a couple of contacts. It's not about Gever only coming as an exotic teacher coming to the city of Zolan, but it's about the teacher who gets the guts and does something different, innovative, positive. Of course, there will be people saying, oh, this is not the way it works. Of course, there are negative experiences, but still I keep on seeing this teacher, 40-year-old female, that was that had been completely rejected by her students, and she had this great experience with her students on running this project, which was CSI Miami. And yes, what I learned is that the students who don't know that they are students learn the best. If I let them, this is the great time. My 9th graders, after all that testing it was done, everybody says it's a long period, it's a great challenge. They don't care about the grades, and it's a good period to see who is who. And maybe it will sound as if I was bragging, but they are really much better. I try much more. I try to do funny things so that we have really fun. Everybody is in books, and which is not that's case throughout the standard academic year. But the problem would come if the state inspection comes, because this doesn't correspond with the fact what I'm requested to do by the state inspection. Are there any questions?
Mala som to šťastie,
I had the privilege that I went to a primary elementary school in Austria, Slovakia, and the US, and my strongest experience or conviction or impression was that there is so much that needs to be studied through. So if the teacher wants to do something innovative, at the end they say, well, I don't know what the inspection would do, what it would tell me about this. And when I recall my studying years in Slovakia, I'm totally convicted that about half of the curricula from every single subject could be scratched down. And from the subjects I didn't like, I don't remember anything because I just memorized things for that one test. And in those cases, when I liked the subject, then we went through hundreds of authors, but there was never time to read all the books and talk about the books. And then, or we were talking about all the kings and dynasties, but never talked about communism because there was no time for that. So that's primarily question for you, Mr. Pavlov, whether there is any will to size down the number of topics, because currently the trend is just the reverse. There is more and more things add to the things that need to be studied through. I don't know whether this is about the State Pedagogical Institute or the Ministry of Education. Well, I'm not sure if I'm competent to respond to your question. I don't know whether there is a will, because that should be declared by the ministry as their agenda, whether they are interested in doing so or what is their direction. I don't know. We will shortly see it. This is the agenda of the State Pedagogical Institute. This is a competent and accountable institute for the content of curricula. And I keep on really underlining the fact that we are so obsessed with the content, because you can regulate the process of education at the input level, that the teacher gets the curricula, gets the textbook, or whether I put more emphasis on the output. What should be the agreed output? What should the students know at the end of the year? And I believe this should be the tendency we should take. We should focus more on the output. Well, we have had various attempts to size down the number of topics in the curriculum. However, the problem is such that a group of physicists, as the scientists and the academic professionals get together, and that they should filter the number of subjects in the physics. But this is impossible for them because everything seems to be important for them, so they can never come to a conclusion. So the only potential solution is that the teachers of Slovak will prepare curricula for the teachers of chemistry and vice versa, because and only then we get the things that are relevant. Because if we continue in this way, then we will end up as at the end of the 80s, when this experiment was carried out, that at the end of this exercise there were more things to cover in the curricula than before that.
I have just one small thing to add, which is that if we look at curriculum and we try to say, oh, this is everything that everybody should know when they graduate from school, that's the beginning of our mistake. Because we need to understand, just like the person who asked the question said, the kids are always going to pay more attention to something that they're passionate about and less attention to the things that they're just surviving. And they're all going to graduate with different gaps in their education. We're never going to be able to create a single education system that teaches everybody equally well. They're always going to be individual learners, right? I mean, we're not a society of sheep, you know, not in Slovakia and not in the United States. We're individuals, but what we can do is give them the skills of being lifelong learners. You want that person, when they get their job, to aggressively learn the new things that they have to do. And that's something we can actually measure. How good is this person at learning new things? How passionate are they about what they're doing? We can look at the hours they put in. I'll bet that she read a lot more in her free time than she did chemistry in her free time. I think we can stop asking that question, how many facts did you learn in school? And we can start looking at how good are the learners we're producing and what contributions they make to society 10 years after they graduate, right? That's the true measure of the value of an education. So why don't we look at that? Why don't we let schools all try different ways of teaching across the nation? We'll give them 10 or 20 years to kind of get their experiments in play, and then we'll look. Which ones produced the most productive contributors to society? Then we might have an idea, oh, these 5 or 6 different approaches seem to be working. Let's do more of that and less of those people who are still teaching facts. We already know that doesn't work for most of the population. It doesn't seem like a very hard equation to figure out. So, thank you.
Ja mám taký krátky komentár.
Just a short comment, and maybe there is a question at the end. It was very interesting for me to hear the idea from Gever at TEDx, create an experience and the learning will come. To me, this is a consensus between the two camps. Because I don't understand why we have two camps, why we have on one end those who defend the traditional methods, and then we have more liberal approach on the other hand, because I don't think these are in contradiction. I think there is a compromise in between these two, which we can take. We don't have to leave the traditional basis and fundaments of learning which prevail in Slovakia, and on the other hand, we can still infiltrate some new innovative ways. So who should define the key vision in Slovakia, the key vision for the learning system, for educational system? In Slovakia, I believe education, the whole area of education is like a laboratory in Slovakia, where each minister comes with some new chemicals and with some new curricular reforms. I don't think the Ministry of Education in Slovakia can define this key vision. So my question is, who should define it, and how does it work in the United States? Who defines this social consensus about education in the country, and who are the stakeholders here? Who should be involved in this discussion about the key vision? Because in Slovakia it is just the Ministry of Education, and every 4 years we come up with new discussion and new radical changes.
In America, education has national standards and overriding state standards. So if you visit every state, you see different variations. But I will tell you that California and a few other states are the only places where you can do a very radical alternative like mine. Most of the funding for schools is dependent on how well the children do on a set of exams, and a large portion of the year is dedicated to preparing the children for those exams, to renew the funding for the school. I think the simple change that you could have in your education system is to cut 1/3 of your curriculum out and make some room for even the most formulaic project-based learning experiences would be a breath of fresh air. It doesn't have to be quite as crazy as my school. I have a unique opportunity to try some things, but I think your opportunity here is, as a people, to demand change, to be the responsible parents of not just your children, but of your society, and say to the ministers of education, we don't want this. You seem to be making something that we're not asking for. So here's what we want. What we want is passionate, engaged citizens who love life and love learning. I also want to abuse my position on the couch for a moment and point out one really productive experiment that's been taking place in traditional education in the United States. It's something we call flipping the classroom. Has anybody heard of this term, a flipped classroom? A flipped classroom is one where the children take the content of the lesson home and read it as homework, and they do their problem solving and homework in the classroom with their teacher. They often work in small peer-to-peer groups to struggle through the problems together using the things that they've learned. It leverages the fact that some children learn some things and other ones forget that part. But for every child, it's a different set of things, and they find that as a collective group of peers working together, developing the skills of collaboration, they can construct the answers to these questions, these homework questions that normally they struggle with. This has proven to be such a productive, acceptable mode of alternative education that many traditional public schools are now adopting this mode for math, chemistry, physics, biology, and language arts. That what was once a solitary struggle that was beating the thrill of learning out of the children suddenly turned into this shared productive experience in the classroom where the teacher felt more like a collaborator and less like a dictator.
Maybe I would go back to the conflict and the core of this conflict. Why does it actually exist? It probably exists because academics are very proud people, and they create the artificial problem, probably, because these are people who believe there is a set of facts that the pupils need to learn. And on the other hand, there are those who want the experience, and they are aware of the fact that creating an experience on a sensible basis takes time. And that's why there is a conflict. There are people who believe there is a set of facts you need to learn, but if you have a book of the entire history of of mankind, you are not able to create a sense of the experience of this whole book, because it would just take too much time. So in order to create experience out of history, you would have to skip some facts and replace them with interesting projects on single eras, for instance, or single heroes in the history. If I may, I'd like to add that when it comes to compulsory set of knowledge, we as teachers are there in order to take pupils' interests. I was interested in the academy of Mr. Khan. Of course, it's also a paradoxical experience, but I like to take some new experience, and I was trying to construct something myself. I made some tutorials, children looked at it, and we've shared some programs and some softwares. We were chatting with my pupils from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. On the background, I could hear parents telling kids off that they should have gone to bed, and Then I told children then that it's late and that we all need to go to sleep. But still, I heard they were chatting, and the next day classes were full of these chats about what they've done the day before and how interesting the school can be with Bélik.
Mr. Tulley, my name is Bill Friedel. I'm with the Evangelical Lyceum in Bratislava and an American working here, a retired businessman teaching English. Could you please give an example of this classroom flipping? I understand the concept, but I need it applied in one setting, please.
So let's take people always like when I use mathematics as an example because they always think that's the hardest thing to teach. Let's suppose that we're studying algebra. We have these complex formulas where we're trying to find the slope of a line or where it intersects the x-axis, for example. Given that as a homework assignment, find the slope of this line and where it intercepts the x-axis, a child at home is often challenged more by what they don't know than by what they do. You know, they're not working from a place of strength, they're struggling with their weaknesses. If we bring that problem and set it on the table with 2 or 3 students, what we find is that each student is contributing one aspect of their strength, and together they see that between the 3 of them, they do have an answer. Maybe it's not quite right, but it's at least they have some shared sense of having contributed to getting to the answer. The teacher comes by and he looks at their answer and he's like, you know, you're partway there, but it looks like right here you've got the slope but not the intercept, you know, and suddenly it's a challenge. It's an interesting puzzle. Like, how did we get the slope right but not the intercept? How does that happen? And they start to realize, the slope of the line can remain constant when the intercept can vary, and that must be this variable. And suddenly we see a shared victory that reinforces a simple idea about algebra. If they do their homework in the classroom with the contribution of the knowledgeable teacher, that teaching ends up feeling more like collaboration. They're collaborating with their peers, and the teacher is often providing that little missing element. Then that night they go home and they read the next day's lesson, and there's some new ideas in there and ways to apply the formula, and again they come in the next day and are presented with these interesting challenges that are not this solitary struggle, but this kind of joyful discovery of the solutions.
Good evening, Michal Kovač, and I study at the University of Economics, and I lead an educational center. I have a question about secondary schools. We keep on discussing how we could improve, how to do more innovations, and those sitting here, we most probably have a positive attitude towards it, and we want to learn from one another. But the question is, what to do with all those who are not here? Because we are running in sort of circles. So there's a community of people who has a good attitude towards it, who want to do it, but we can't find a solution how to motivate those who are not interested in it or who don't want to do it. And one of the goals of such debates should be to brainstorm about ideas how to motivate the others to join us. And that's why I want to ask, what do you believe? What's the biggest motivation or strongest, or what could be the strongest motivation, or where to push in order that teachers want to teach in innovative way? Doesn't matter whether they are old or young or whatever. What do you believe? Where should we start? Is it a system? Is it money? Or do you think that it is sufficient to get those annual contests about the most innovative teacher. I want that the teacher at the secondary school becomes the fact that she tells in a bar in the evening that I'm a teacher, that it's a sexy statement, and that they are interested, involved. So your ideas, how we could, in this broader horizon, contribute in a more systematic way, how to support those initiatives.
I can't give a dating advice for teachers in bars, but I think we need to be careful and make sure that we all understand that innovation is a process, not a thing. It's not a unique moment, it's an ongoing commitment to looking at our progress and making positive change. At TEDx Bratislava, I had the pleasure of listening to and then spending some time with a young man named Ahmed Kucha, who is the founder of TEDx Cairo. And this organization was inadvertently key to the revolution of Arab Spring. And what Ahmed told us at TEDx Bratislava was, don't misunderstand. The true changes of Arab Spring were these tiny little changes 10 years earlier, these little experiments that happened, these projects by individual people to make little meaningful changes. And that's how revolution happens, right? It's the accumulation of these changes, and then suddenly it builds to something, and it's so obvious that the wall has to come down. Like, that's the only answer right now. And that can happen. We shouldn't be impatient, but we also shouldn't allow things to go on the way they're going on. We have to make that little change. You put your child in that alternative school. If there's no alternative school, you help teachers create one. You make change through small change. So that's what we should look for.
Microphone, please. Please, we can't hear the speaker. I believe this was great. You just hit the point. I don't know. What would financial remuneration do? Whether that is a trick if they get the double or 1.6 of the average. I believe that teachers who work just according to the height of the salary will do so no matter how much they will get. I have 550 euros per month plus some personal bonuses, and I have certain ideas, and if I get an offer to go to do something in my spare time, I just go for it. I don't know how to make those people working in the educational system, but maybe it would be worthwhile to try to motivate in some schools some selected individuals in a specific topic. I don't have a specific idea, but still, maybe an offer at a certain school that, okay, there is a remuneration that you consider to be sufficient, and I don't know whether that would do the trick. Again, can't hear the speaker, please. I would just like to react. Maybe could you, what motivates you to do things differently? Well, it's the fact that I'm so lazy. It's much better for me to teach in an environment when kids are motivated and they are eager to learn. I know I spend a couple of hours in prep work, but still, when the class came, I just sit around and look at them playing and enjoying, and it's much better scenario than do it vice versa. I didn't used to be this in the past. I used to teach in the fact that I came up to the students, I just did all the blabbing, then I did some tests and then left. But then I realized that when you really do your prep work, then magic can happen. So I believe this is just my laziness. Anybody wants to add anything? Well, what should be done? We keep on meeting those two concepts in the school. There are two groups of teachers, passive ones who see their mission in the facilitation of the mass of facts, and then the second group that is represented by Roman. But it's not all that contradiction as it looks like, but I believe that their assistance will need to be provided to all the teachers in all those areas. Yes, funds. Yes, we need to show them way that it works. What are the potential tools for innovation? I maybe perceived it way too much in an organizational point of view or legislative point of view, but all the teachers are stuck in their subjects. One classroom of music, what can be done, how many, what can you done within it, what needs to be fit in, etc. And all this initiative about the reform, just not that it ended halfway, it actually ended in nowhere. We should reform all the knowledge and facts that should be presented to the students in more digestible, understandable way. But this is all what collapsed. The teachers should have conditions and should have the courage to test something new, because they do need help in that. And if we help them, they will definitely do so. They will manage that, and because they have capacity for that. Well, I believe that it's definitely money. Without the money, no move can be made, disregarding the fact whether the average salary will be 2.0 or all the private schools are closed down. Without teachers thinking about their survival, they can't concentrate on thinking how they could improve their work. But of course, it's not only about that. In my opinion, it's only an inevitable prerequisite for improving the situation. So to pour more money into the system, and definitely it is also a social challenge, because many times we keep on talking about Finland that managed it. 30 years ago, I was not in Finland, but I know people who were there who were saying that in Finland the educational system was really in a bad shape. So the change is possible, but you need to just understand that you need time, you need money, and you need to have a good social sort of order or definition of what is wanted and what kind of assistance should be provided to the educational system, because the assistance is needed. I would like to ask Mr. Bélik, when you had an innovative approach in your school, what did your fellow teachers think? How many of them tried that? Who liked that? Who liked your example? Who started testing it? And how many of them had this negative or rather neutral approach? Is this recorded? Well, this is a thin ice. Well, I do not consider myself to be innovative. I teach in a normal way, and others teach in a different way. I love to really show off. I communicate with people, maybe I steal their ideas. I have rather experienced that those who are from outside of our environment or outside of our town get hooked. Those who don't want, you can do anything, but you just won't move them. I have offered some things that I know that I offered meetings. There was such a poor turnout. And I'm not going to force them. This is my free time, and of course I can use my time differently. So if there is no interest, then I can't do anything. But there are definitely people who try. And I'm not the only one, definitely, that I am the flagship. You know, some contests probably turned me into a flagship, and then I keep on sitting in all those forums and conferences. I just had this status on Facebook that I am in a similar situation as Hudáček hockey player. Until now, he was just playing hockey on a PlayStation, and all of a sudden he's sitting with the world class, and I should pretend that I'm world class as well. So this is quite a novelty for me, but okay. Well, what I wanted to say is that what I was asking, what's the percentage of the people who are potentially receptive? Whether the small projects are enough, whether this mass of the teachers is actually movable by anything? Well, oh my God, I need to be so diplomatic. To start with, this is good. It will most probably take time, and you won't make anybody. It probably needs new air, which is also a big question. Who are the graduates? Sometimes I exchange notes with some graduates, but well, having this experience, it's maybe a challenge, and we really need to dig through many areas. Any other questions?
Hello, my name is Vladimír Kaštil. Recently, I was present at a similar discussion about the status of judiciary system and then healthcare system. And we were going through very similar questions and topics. And the conclusion was that we've been asking these questions and having same discussions for 15 years, and we haven't gone anywhere. So we could actually say that we have more and more of those good examples and those lights at the end of the tunnel. And I believe it's about small changes. We should really take into consideration that there are many small steps that we have taken, and we cannot expect a huge change overnight. And when I remember my school years, it wasn't the whole system that has changed or something. It was one particular teacher that was passionate enough that he actually managed to light the spark in me. So my question is, does it really make sense to try and change the whole system? Isn't this about small changes that each and individual teacher can make? I think this could be an impulse for new teachers to come if they themselves would have greater opportunities to start up something new. I have many friends who are now at the universities in order to become teachers, and I believe this would be attractive for them.
I think you're right that it's going to require the accumulation of small changes, but we should be careful of something that behavioral economists call confirmation bias. You know, you had a single teacher who lit a spark in you, and for you, as a result, your education was a overall positive experience. I think that we could probably see that for every person who's in politics right now, that they look back at their educations and they say, hey, that worked pretty well for me. Why doesn't it work for everybody else? You know, that they have that confirmation. If we look at everybody who graduated in any given year with a politician who's in office right now, we could probably see that 80 to 90% of those people are not now politicians. And maybe even 80 to 90% of them don't have any memorable thing they can point back to their education and say, well, I survived it, but really now I'm not using any of it in my job, which doesn't require very much from me, so I go to work and I come home and I watch television and I eat my delicious Slovakian sausages. And we just have to be able to separate those people who were successful because of the sheer number of people who went through the system. Of course it's going to work for someone. What we would like to see is that it actually works for everybody. And that's not an unreasonable thing to ask of education. So we need to keep making those small changes until it does work for everybody.
Ešte nejaká reakcia, ak môžem voľne parafrázovať, tak v podstate, či vôbec treba sa zameriavať na zmenu systému.
So the question now is, in order to rephrase it, should we really go for the complex change in the education system, or whether we should go for individual changes in teachers? Mali by sme ísť po obidvoch. My feeling is that you can come and see my classes and see for yourself. Sometimes my friends are invited to my classes because they believe it's just very simple. I invite them to my class. I tell them what is the point of this class, and they can try for themselves. And if they actually do this, if they go for this experience, they prepare for hours and hours, and then they usually fail anyway. So this is an experience that everybody should have. It's not so easy to teach and to take kids' interest. It's fantastic for kids. I always invite interesting people. They are usually friends of mine who have either traveled or who have some more dominant, more affluent position in society. So they are not conformist teachers. They have something to tell to kids. They have something to share with kids. And this is an interesting experience for my kids too. And that's probably one part of the answer to the question about what can bring about the change in education. There are schools who come up with very simple activity called reading of fathers. Each week, one day a week, a father comes to a class and reads out for kids. And it turned out to be a very interesting experience because they can see their fathers as role models. It doesn't cost anything, our system. It only takes a teacher to write a note to a parent to come to a class and bring something they'd like to read out. So this is a simple experience. Of course, it will not solve all the problems, but a part of the answer to this question is to get more involvement from parents, more engagement. Because if a system is set in a way that no one who hasn't got pedagogical degree cannot intervene with education, then it will not work. This is quite an interesting phenomenon. Mr. Khan, for instance, or others have never been through teachers' studies, and their advices are invaluable for teachers. So I believe we would need some systemic step, but I also believe there are smart people there up there who will think of something. I don't want to be disrespectful. I have not been very happy with my high school or university, and most of the things I've learned from people who were my colleagues and were not.
On the note of parents coming into the classroom and reading their children, I heard a horrible story today, and I just wanted to share it with you, which is that I found out that these 8 children that I was working with were in this special needs program, and that at this school, the criteria for special needs had quickly boiled down to, were you of Roma descent or not? Then when I learned about these, I met 2 of these volunteers who come in every day for a few hours to work with these children to assist the teachers. It turns out that the headmistress, the principal of the school, charges them money for using the school. So they're volunteering their time, and yet they're being charged money to come in and help build a better learning experience. It's an outrage, I think. And I promote the idea that having people come in with their different perspectives is really good for the children. It's good to learn that learning doesn't just happen with a teacher, it happens everywhere. And even if they're not good teachers of mathematics, it still helps for children to see different perspectives, and to watch somebody struggle as a teacher gives them a respect for the quality of their own teacher.
Yet again, this dichotomy of, yes, I'm saying yes for every single teacher, but those debates that within the prep work, what is the importance of the pedagogical work and what is actually the preparation of our future teachers, it's poor. And we don't achieve change in the training, that at least 25% of their studies in the 3rd and 4th grade of the university is them teaching and being an internships. It should be complementary with what Roman says. We should go through individual examples, through the efforts, through the commitment. I have experience with Montessori education, and there's one basic principle: prepared environment for the children. What it means is that if you want the kid to do something and to find its way to it, you just prepare the environment. If you want it to draw and cut, then you put the scissors on the table, the paper, so it is accessible. You don't force the kid, but when the time comes, it's out there. And I believe that this is a principle that is valid for the teacher and applies for the teacher as well. We need the environment. So if we want the schools to be more innovative, if we want the teachers all of a sudden to have a will to do things differently, then first we need to prepare the environment. It doesn't need to be anything systematic that, yet again, somebody will tell them how to do it, but maybe their hands should be loosened. And I would be interested in your perspective, how such a process should look like, such a prepared environment, something that would eliminate fear from you, that there's an inspector standing above. We were talking about money already, but what are the simple things? What would be prepared and ready environment for you as teachers, so that you would be willing and you would feel that it's worthwhile to try something differently? It's a question to everybody. I've just found out that I'm probably innovative due to the computers. That was the least expensive thing. once there were computers at the school, it was the easiest way for me, because to bring some new material to create a suitable environment, if you come to our school, it's so cold. It kills something in the children. What should be there? Well, what would be enough would be the content of the reform. Either it was the last one or a semi-last one or whichever, because something new is coming, because that reform that was talking about the output, and it was up to the teacher to structure the whole process. And once I understood how it should work, like, I found out, wow, that would be great, and I would go back to inspectors. I wouldn't mind the inspectors coming. I would be really glad to welcome them, to hear what do they believe, what do they think about my way of instruction, because it's not all that structured as it is standardly required. And they come up in my city part that we should cooperate among schools. They lured us into this cooperation, and maybe this is a way how to connect, how to network, to exchange information. So what would be the most helpful thing in the environment? Well, different buildings, but this is totally unrealistic. Yes, buildings. I mean buildings. I don't mean the boxes we are in and the cells we are teaching in, where this officer is barking at the students and is controlling the students. It is quite common that sixth graders, seventh graders form one team, but our experience is also that they have friends from higher grades, lower grades, and they can't network because just the very structure and the layout of the building does not allow for that. There's this great study carried out by McKinsey Corporation, how the educational systems are improving worldwide, and how in different countries they have tried to make some research on that, and they ended up with a set of practices that could be implemented in order to improve the schools or educational system. And one of the things that is on the list, or one of the things that is being improved by the educational system, is giving freedom to teachers so that they can set their own training program themselves, or educational program, a program of instruction, but only once the environment is prepared. And that's one of the problems. We did this step that we gave liberty or freedom to teachers, but we had not been working on the environment before, and the reaction was extremely negative. They perceived the whole reform as increasing bureaucracy. So I fully agree with you, Rastislav, that the preparation of the environment is extremely important. But it's not only one thing. It's about money, it's about the equipment, the atmosphere, parents, everything that makes this puzzle of environment together. I couldn't choose one thing and that saying that, okay, if we change this, the environment will improve. You just can't do that.
Not to make a joke out of this, but I visited 2 different schools. I've visited 4 schools now, but 2 of them. One, a university for teachers, and one primary school, and neither one of them had toilet paper in the toilets. That feels like a human rights violation. These are not facilities that encourage children to learn. These are dark, cold places, like our friend mentioned. And the place where you go to school is where you light the fire. It's where the spark starts. It should be the most interesting place in a child's life. It should be a place where they run to get to school, where they arrive early because they might get to hang out with their teachers. I don't know how we got to a place where we thought it was okay that kids hated being in school, like that was acceptable. That's not a bad measure either to use. We can just ask the kids at the end of the day, how was your day at school? It was boring. What did you do today? Nothing. These are not acceptable answers. When you ask your child how they did at school, if they say, it was the same boring stuff, you should be at the school the next day talking to the principal. My child is bored in your school. That is unacceptable. If you bought a car and it only went 10 miles an hour, you would be right back at the dealership saying, this car only goes 10 miles an hour. Please give me a new car. If you have a child who is not engaged in school, you should be engaged in a conversation with the people who are creating that education. That's your responsibility. They need to know that you are dissatisfied parents. I have dissatisfied parents at my school. They're not complaining that their children are bored. They're not complaining that their children aren't learning. They're complaining that their children won't come home. They're complaining that their children cry at the end of the day because they're not quite finished with what they were working on. And could we please have an end of the day that ramped down the child a little bit into a calmer state so they would come home? These children cry on Friday because it's 2 days until school starts again. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think that's a good way to feel about school. I think that it's the small changes, the little conversations that you have with educators. And they're going to say, we don't have enough money. They're going to say, we don't have time. That's another way of saying, I hate my job. If you're passionate about teaching, you're going to do it for 500 euros a month. I think that we just need to be a little more vocal about our dissatisfaction. If children don't like a class, they should all go and sit in the principal's office and say, this class is killing my love of learning, and I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm going to sit here until you present me or my parents with a list of changes that you're going to make this class better for me. And support your children if they do that, because they're going to need a lot of support. Thanks.
Thank you for this. It means with the clap that I should stop now. Do slovenčiny sa musím prehodiť?
Now I switch to English. Thank you very much for... I have got the orders that we should wrap it up, and I would like to finish with analogy. As a colleague mentioned that he participated in 3 similar debates with a very similar course, and I will link this to this bit disgusting analogy with other sectors, with toilet paper. Yes, there is no toilet paper in our hospitals, there is no toilet paper at our courts. Unfortunately, this is really the case, but we talk about transformation, how we can expect, if there is no society or no specific sector ready for something, when the environment is not ready, how we can expect that the people would behave differently, what you have just mentioned. But the question then is, and I'll just leave it there, whether we could make changes in environment that is not the most favorable one, and really prepared whether something could be done. And this, I leave you with this to think about it. Thank you very much. Thank you all the panelists. Thank you who have survived with us. And if you are interested in the recordings of this debate, please, you can check it out on Facebook, on the OSF webpage. Thank you so much, and there is a little refreshment out there, so please go ahead on your way out so you can continue in your debates. And if Gever interests you at the www.ucime.sk, you will find his lecture he held on Friday in a seminar. It was really good lecture, so check it out, please.